Okay, good morning to all. So we are discussing about the various neurological disorders. So in the previous class, we discussed about trigeminal neuralgia. So today we are going to discuss about another important cranial nerve that is most commonly affected in our regular practice. So that is Bell's palsy. So in the next few slides, I am going to discuss about the introduction of the facial nerve and the incidence of the Bell's palsy and some brief history of the facial nerve and anatomy of the facial nerve and etiology, pathology and the clinical features. How to differentiate the upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron type of facial nerve palsies, and how to localize the lesion in facial nerve palsy and differential diagnosis, and finally treatment and prognosis of the facial nerve palsy. So coming to Bell's palsy, it is one of the most common neurological disorder affecting the cranial nerves. Facial nerve is the seventh cranial nerve, and Bell's palsy is characterized by an abrupt onset of unilateral peripheral facial paresis, mainly due to a lesion within the facial canal, or sometimes the cause of the palsy may be undiagnosed, that is idiopathic facial paralysis. So in Bell's palsy, most of the times taste sensation will also be affected. Coming to incidence of the Bell's palsy, it may develop at any age, but most commonly seen in between the group of 20 to 50 years of age group, and it affects both sexes equally. And the annual incidence of this disease is it affects around 25 to 30 individuals per 1 lakh people. So coming to a brief history of facial nerve palsy. So it is first described by Sir Charles Bell more than a century ago, but there is some still controversies going on about its management and etiology of Bell's palsy. Coming to anatomy of a facial nerve, so it is a mainly a motor nerve, and it supplies all the muscles concerned with the facial expression of one half of the face. And it has a sensory component also, but it is very small component. Uh, it conveys taste sensation from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, and it also conveys sensation from the cutaneous impulses of the anterior wall of the external auditory canal. Coming to anatomy of the facial palsy, facial nerve. So the motor, it has some motor nucleus and sensory nucleus. The motor nucleus lies just anterior and lateral to the abducens nerve, that is sixth cranial nerve. And after leaving the pons, facial nerve enters into the auditory internal auditory meatus with the acoustic nerve. And then the nerve continues its course in the facial canal and exits from the skull via the stylomastoid. Then it passes through the parotid gland and subdivides into various branches to supply the facial muscles. And it gives some branches in the facial canal, it gives some nerves to stapedius and carda tympani and the greater petrosal nerve in the facial canal. And it also gives some branches in the stylomastoid foramen, posterior auricular nerve, nerve to stylohyoid, and nerve digastric. And finally, after leaving the parotid gland, it divides into temporal, zygomatic, buccal, mandibular, and cervical branches. So these are the various facial muscles. So frontalis muscle is helpful in wrinkling of the face, and for a front and vertical wrinkles of the forehead, corrugator. Closure of the eyes is mainly by orbicularis oculi muscle, and visioning needs orbicularis oris muscle, and puffing of the mouth is mainly by buccinator muscle, and showing of the teeth is by mainly dilator of the mouth, and forcible pulling of the angle of the mouth downwards and backwards is by platysma muscle. So coming to etiology of facial nerve palsy, facial palsy, the main cause is cephalic herpes zoster is the most common cause. It may also be caused by some tumors in the cerebellopontine angle and the meningeal carcinomatosis, and some fractures and tumors around the skull of the base may also produce facial palsy. And peripherally, tumors of the parotid gland may also affect the facial palsy. There are some other causes for facial palsies like Lyme disease, HIV, and tuberculosis infection, infectious mononucleosis. This slide is showing some common causes of seventh nerve palsy. Common causes for facial palsy, human type of illness. This is caused by vascular lesions like strokes, cerebrovascular accidents, common cause for unilateral human type of facial palsy. It may also caused by cerebral tumors and multiple sclerosis. Unilateral human type of facial palsy is mainly by herpes infection, and occasionally it may be due to some therapeutic tumors, head injuries, skull-based tumors, and the general disorders like diabetes and hypertension, element type of palsy. Bilateral human type of facial palsy is again vascular etiology most of the times due to multi-infarct dementias, and motor neuron disease also produces bilateral human type of facial palsy. And bilateral element type of facial palsy is caused by GBS, sarcoidosis, leprosy, leukemia, or lymphoma. So these are the common causes for unilateral or bilateral facial palsy. Coming to pathology, so in acute stage, there will be a swelling of the facial nerve and compression within the facial canal by abnormal vasculature or aberrant vasculatures. And there is some inconclusive evidence that it may be a manifestation of herpes simplex infection because uh, there is some isolation of herpes virus DNA from facial nerve with PCR techniques that supports the evidence of it may be a reactivation of the latent herpes virus uh, manifestation. So in 85% of mild Bell's paralysis, the paralysis is mainly due to a local conduction block within the facial canal due to a segmental demyelination or axonal degeneration. Suppose if the mild paralysis is not progressed to the Bell's palsy, the full recovery of the few weeks with rapid demyelination of the facial nerve. In case of total Bell's palsy, along with the demyelination of nerve, there will be axonal degeneration. The recovery is usually incomplete because regeneration of axonal regeneration takes more time. So regeneration of axonal regeneration, regeneration of minimum takes more than 3 months to recovery. But even after the long duration, the recovery is usually incomplete. So during this process of recovery, sometimes there will be abnormal connections will occur. That is called anomalous regeneration of the seventh nerve. So because this is mainly due to abnormal connections of newly regenerated axons. So this will result in some abnormal movements over the face. That is called synkinesis. So synkinesis are abnormal movements of attempts to move one group of facial muscles results in contraction of other group of muscles. Suppose closing of the eyelids or blinking results in simultaneous twitching of angle because of uh, innervation of orbicularis oris muscles, which is the fibers supplying the orbicularis oculi. Like that, movements of the face may also produce facial spasms. So that is called hemifacial spasms. And one more abnormal movement of the face is jaw winking. Jaw winking causes closure of the eyelids on the side of facial palsy uh, and opening the jaw. So this slide is showing smiling causes the closure of the eyelid. So because of abnormal regeneration of axons, abnormal connections of regeneration. So one more abnormal movements is crocodile tears. This is mainly anomalous tearing because of any activity of facial muscles. Suppose patients may have lacrimation during eating because of innervation of lacrimal gland, which are fibers originally connected with the muscles of face. So that is about anomalous regeneration of thumb cranial nerve during the recovery phase. And coming to clinical manifestations of Bell's palsy, the most alarming symptom of Bell's palsy is paralysis of facial muscles. And the majority of the affected patients, they think that they have been suffering with a stroke or they have been suffering with an intracranial tumor. Though this slide is showing common manifestations of Bell's palsy, the possible symptoms are usually they will have a drooping of the eyelids, dryness in the eyes, and sometimes excessive tears from the affected side, facial palsy, thickening of the facial muscles, loss of nationality, heating of the top of the face, impaired taste. These are all common manifestations of Bell's palsy. Usually, the onset of the Bell's palsy is rapid and is frequently accompanied by a pain below the ear or around the mastoid region. And the paralysis, once started, it usually reaches its maximum severity within a period of 1 to 2 days. And most of the times, paralysis may be complete or incomplete. So, in incomplete paralysis, that is partial paralysis, the lower half of the foot is still affected by the upper half of the foot. Because of this weakness of communication, there will be connection between the gums and cheek, and sometimes some of the feet may hesitate while drinking near the angle of the mouth. This results in difficulty in eating, and sometimes patients may develop visual and affected side the face will get scratched, and because of is outline, the patients will have unable to close the eyes. Because of this unable to close the eyes, continuous exposure of corneal corneal dryness or injury to the conjunctiva. In more severe cases, the loss of taste sensation may be affected from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue. And suppose if the nerve to the stapedius is affected, that results in hyperacusis. That is lack of tolerance of high-pitched sounds. Then coming to how to differentiate between upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron type of facial palsy. So, uh, facial palsy may be due to supranuclear lesions or infranuclear lesions. So, supranuclear lesions mainly spares the upper part of the face because the upper part of the muscles of the upper part of the face are innervated by bilateral hemispheres. So, only lower half of the face on the opposite side is affected in supranuclear lesions, that is upper motor neuron type of lesions. And sagging of the face does not occur in human type of lesions, which is a common manifestation of element type of lesion. Coming to element type of lesion or infranuclear lesions, it involves a whole half of the face on the same side. In case of human type of facial palsy, opposite lower half of the face is affected. In infranuclear lesions or element type of lesions, one half of the face on same side, ipsilateral side is affected. So this slide is showing human type of lesions. Upper part of the face is spared, and in type in and the opposite lower half of the face is commonly affected. In element type of lesions, one half of the face is affected on the same side. Coming to localize the lesion. So the localization of lesion is mainly by depending upon the signs and symptoms of infranuclear lesions according to the site of the lesion. Suppose if the lesion is at or above the styloid foramen, that is, this slide is showing just lesion. Suppose if the lesion is at or above the styloid foramen, usually that results in Bell's palsy with features of loss of motor functions of all muscles of facial expression, with the deviation of mouth towards the normal side, and the inability to close the mouth and eye, and the accumulation of food in the mouth. So that results in Bell's palsy. without any loss of taste sensation or without any hyperacusis. Suppose if the lesion is above the origin of cardia tympani, that is B. The slide is showing the lesion is above the origin of the cardia tympani. So they will have, along with Bell's palsy, there will be some decreased salivation and loss of taste sensation in the anterior two-thirds of the tongue because of disruption of cardia tympani. And coming to lesion above the origin of the nerve to stapedius, they will have, along with Bell's palsy, they will have hyperacusis. They is unable to tolerate the loud sounds because of destruction of nerve to stapedius. And one more lesion at the geniculate ganglion usually produces Bell's palsy along with loss of lacrimation. So this will usually localize the lesion based on the associated features with Bell's palsy. Coming to assessment of Bell's palsy, we should assess all the muscles of the facial expression, like the frontalis muscle, by asking the patient to wrinkle his forehead and ask the patient to close his eyes while testing the orbicularis oculi muscle, and ask them to smile to notice the loss of nasolabial fold, or to know the deviation of angle of mouth. And usually they will unable to whistle because of paralysis of orbicularis oculi, and they will unable to blow the cheek because of paralysis of buccinator muscles and the orbicularis oris muscle. So this is how usually we should assess the patients. Coming to laboratory confirmation, we require complete blood count and random blood sugar, uh, mainly for diabetic patients, and HIV also we should rule out, and sometimes we may require MRI brain. Coming to differential diagnosis of facial palsy, so suppose if the lesion is within the brainstem, so there will be preservation of lost sensation, and usually lesion, facial nerve lesion within the brainstem, they will have other cranial palsies like fifth or sixth cranial palsies, and they will have pyramidal tract lesions. So these all differentiate from facial palsy, and sometimes patients with the middle ear disease may also produce facial palsy, but they will have other symptoms and signs suggest of middle ear infections. And as a general part of general disorders like diabetes, Lyme disease, and sarcoidosis may also present with facial palsy, but they can be easily differentiated with other features. And sometimes patients may suffer with bilateral Bell's palsy, which is a rare phenomenon. So that is called bilateral facial paralysis or facial diplegia. This is a very rarely seen nowadays. And the most common causes for bilateral facial palsy, uh, GBS, sarcoidosis, Lyme disease, HIV infection, and syphilis. So in all these conditions, patient may be affected bilaterally. Coming to management of facial nerve palsy. So most patients with Bell's palsy usually recover completely. So the most commonly used drug is prednisolone, corticosteroid. So around 40 to 60 milligram per day during the first week to 10 days after onset has been beneficial in several trials. And usually the mechanism of action of corticosteroid, usually it will helps to decrease the swelling of the facial nerve, and it will also uh, decrease the possibility of permanent damage by relieving the swelling, mostly in the facial canal. And because of unable to close their eyes, they will have some injuries to the eyes. So we have to take some precautions to protect the eye by closing the eyelids with plaster during the sleep. So if you give corticosteroids for minimum 10 days, usually there will be some increase in the percentage of patients with complete recovery after 9 months. And there are so many trials of prednisolone dose. Sometimes some trials may tried around 25 milligrams of prednisolone for 10 days. Some trials may advise 60 milligrams for first 5 days and then with the tapering dose of next 5 days. So by adding acyclovir to the prednisolone, usually some trials discovered that they have no difference with adding addition of acyclovir, but there is no evidence of efficacy from antiviral agents alone when they used alone, but they might have a small effect when used along with corticosteroids. Suppose if there is any clinical evidence of herpes zoster, like vesicles around the external artery meatus or over the body, then we have to give antiviral drugs like acyclovir or famciclovir, minimum 5 to 10 days. So that is about medical management of facial nerve palsy. Coming to surgical management of facial nerve palsy, the main pathology is compression of the facial nerve in the facial canal by aberrant blood vessels. So we have to decompress the facial nerve compression by surgical decompression. But some trials showed that there is no evidence of effectiveness of surgical decompression of facial nerve. Sometimes it may be harmful also. And patients with unable to close their eyes, they require a lateral tarsorrhaphy that involves stitching of the lateral parts of the eyelids, mainly to prevent the injuries to the eyes. And sometimes we may advise some electrical stimulation of the paralyzed facial muscles, but some trials noticed that there is no significant effect on the prognosis. And some cosmetic operations may be needed in certain patients, mainly for facial deformity. The angle of the mouth may be elevated by a facial sling attached to the temporalis fascia, but the results are unsatisfactory. And the restoration of muscle tone may be achieved by anastomosis of the hypoglossal nerve to the facial nerve. So any operation for cosmetic purposes should be considered after an adequate length of time for regeneration. So most of the times we should wait for up to 1 year, then we have to consider for cosmetic surgeries. So Ramsay-Hunt syndrome is another entity that is mainly facial paralysis due to a geniculate herpes zoster. It occurs due to the involvement of geniculate ganglion in the herpes zoster infection. And this syndrome is clinically presents with severe pain in and around the external artery meatus, and sometimes pain may be in the throat. And usually there will be clear appearance of vesicles or the auricles, and sometimes ulcerations in the posterior pharyngeal wall or anywhere around the head, and they will have hyperacusis and the loss of lacrimation, loss of taste sensation, and Bell's palsy. Coming to prognosis of facial nerve palsy, 70% of patients recover completely within a month or 2 months, and 85% achieve near normal facial nerve function. And recovery of taste sensation precedes the recovery of motor function. So early recovery of taste sensation or motor function in the first week is a good prognostic sign. Suppose if there is evidence of denervation after 10 days, in that case, recovery may take months to years, or sometimes it may take more longer. And if the recovery occurs, usually it is incomplete. And in some cases, up to 8% of cases, the Bell's palsy may be recur because of reactivation of the latent herpes virus infection. And this recurrent Bell's palsy is most commonly emerged during an infection or pregnancy or without any cause. But most of the times, the interval between the episodes is unpredictable, but minimum it takes more than 10 years on average. There are certain bad prognostic factors for prognosis. So suppose if the patient have complete facial palsy, or if there is no recovery by 3 weeks of the onset of facial palsy, or if the patient's age is more than 60 years, or if there is any severe pain at the onset, or Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, and if the patient have associated comorbid conditions like diabetes, hypertension, pregnancy, So these are all, they will have more severe disease, and these are bad prognostic factors. So coming to summary, so facial nerve palsy is most common neurological disorder and characterized by abrupt unilateral peripheral facial paralysis, mainly due to a lesion within the facial canal. And most common cause is cephalic herpes zoster. Mainly the paralysis is due to a local conduction block within the facial canal due to segmental demyelination without axonal degeneration. In severe cases, axonal degeneration may be possible. And the most alarming symptom of Bell's palsy is paralysis of facial muscles, and it usually reaches its maximum severity of paralysis after 1 to 2 days. And coming to management, so prednisolone along with antiviral drugs should be given for minimum 5 to 10 days. And coming to surgical management, surgical decompression of the facial nerve with lateral tarsorrhaphy, the most commonly performed surgeries. And most of the patients with Bell's palsy recover completely. And the difference between upper human type of and element type of lesion. So human type of facial palsy, that is supranuclear lesions, usually spares the upper part of the face. And in case of element type of Bell's palsy, that is infranuclear lesions, so usually it affects the whole of the face, half of the face on the same side, ipsilateral side. So these are all mainly to localize the lesion. Suppose if the patient has a complete interruption of the facial nerve at the stylomastoid foramen, usually they present with a Bell's palsy without any uh, loss of taste sensation or hyperaxis. Suppose if the nerve is damaged at the level of nerve to stapedius, so along with Bell's palsy, they will have hyperaxis. Suppose if the lesion is in the internal artery meatus, so they will have Bell's palsy along with they will have manifestations of sixth or eighth cranial palsy, like deafness, tinnitus, or dizziness. So that is about facial nerve palsy, Bell's palsy. So in the next class, we will discuss about cerebrovascular accidents. Thank you.